And welcome back to the Konsume podcast for News Junkies by News Junkies. My name's Lance Rinker. I am your host, and I am joined by my brother, my actual real-life brother, Rick Rinker. Thank you so much for joining us. How's it going, man?
Doing great. Got a lot to talk about this week. A lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, there's so much going on right now. We really don't have time to get to it all in just a 30-minute segment, but we'll hit some points here, and I'm sure they can look to the site at konsume.com for the rest next week. But let's get things rolling with WikiLeaks. Now, you wrote a pretty interesting piece a few days ago about the WikiLeaks release as far as the Sony emails, that hack. I mean, a lot of revelations, and also something pretty interesting as far as Sony and Netflix, their relationship. Let's get into that. So while you were writing this piece, and you did some research, spoke to some people and whatnot, what was your big takeaway there from this release?
I guess the big takeaway was how much the first news cycle missed. There was a lot of revelations to be found in the database, and it wasn't until WikiLeaks came along, hosted all of the information in one place on the ClearNet that isn't going anywhere, but made it searchable so that people could really dig into particular executives' emails or looking for keywords. And so it really created a whole new round of media stories for Sony, which was not good for them. And I guess the few takeaways would be number one, the tumultuous relationship between Sony and Netflix, and the fact that a lot of Sony executives actually pirated content themselves and passed it around the office. Sony, who's obviously famous for being particularly litigious when it comes to media copyrights of its movies, music, its own PlayStation network, where it's sued developers who have tried to curtail the PlayStation network. So I find it, I guess, amusing that that they've been caught red-handed pirating content from an author named Jeffrey Carr, who I don't believe is too pleased.
Well, what's interesting is that, a lot of the focus is actually focusing on former Sony executive Amy Pascal. I mean, she's been in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons these last few months. A lot of it has to do with her own emails using her Sony email account. Her talking very negatively about Adam Sandler films. She even went after Angelina Jolie, calling her kind of a talentless hack to an extent. But the other thing is that, and a lot of women's rights groups and feminist organizations are going after people really hardcore for this, for obvious reasons, citing sexism, ageism, that sort of thing. She's 57, about releasing basically the contents of her Amazon shopping cart, like shampoo, perfumes, and also hair dye for her pubic region. I mean,
feminine hygiene.
Right, and also, I mean, let's go in this direction real quick, and then we'll bring it back to, whether WikiLeaks is actually even still relevant or not, which I believe they are, but I want to get your thoughts on that. Amy Pascal, I mean, there are some people, they're just kind of douches, I guess. But at the same time, private emails, it's one of those things where you think it's private, you tell off-the-cuff jokes to people you're close with or whatnot, or people that are kind of like you in the realm of sense of humor, I suppose. But, I have this rule of thumb where I'm not going to send an email to somebody unless it's basically written in a way to where I also believe the person that I might be writing about is going to read it as well. Just kind of keep me in check. Does she kind of deserve this sort of public shaming the way she's gotten?
I don't think so. I think if you looked into anybody's emails, Facebook messages, Snapchat messages, if you were able to poke around on their computer and see drafts of blogs that they've written, anytime you peek into somebody's, private life or home, there's going to be things there that aren't politically correct, things that are unfiltered would come across as mean-spirited or snarky. And I think that a person in this industry, in the entertainment industry in particular, there's a certain amount of snark that goes with it. So no, I don't think she deserves the amount of hate that she's received. I mean, the woman's already lost her job. So I guess, the short and skinny of it is no.
Yeah, it's interesting because, people are all upset because people are, journalists are actually publishing very private details of her emails, even her Amazon shopping cart, like I mentioned. But it's, I guess to an extent, it's like, where's that line between journalism and invasion of privacy, meet? For me, as a journalist, I don't believe that, her Amazon shopping cart's newsworthy, but of course the TMZs of the world do because they want to make fun of it. It's, her comments about, Adam Sandler, Angelina Jolie. She called Henry Cavill, who plays Superman, who's probably one of the better Superman since Chris Reeves, basically just sort of, that guy, as if she's like, whatever about him. I mean, is she not entitled to her own opinion, her own personal opinion as an executive of a major studio such as Sony?
I think anytime you're talking to, potential directors or directors, anytime you're dealing with agents or management, or you're trying to negotiate, budgets, you have to really weigh the pros and cons of working with certain people. And in order to do that, you have to have an honest dialogue with whoever your counterparts are going to be or whoever's going to be in charge of putting that production together. So while it may not be pretty to watch the sausage being made, the end result for Sony over the years has been, pretty successful. A lot of good franchises and a lot of good films have come out of that studio. So, yeah, if you have to speak candidly, unfiltered, in order to get that done, so be it. It was never meant for public consumption. So the fact that now the unfiltered private conversations are coming out, I think that could make anybody look bad. But
okay.
Go
ahead.
To that degree, though, I think it does kind of, bringing it back to WikiLeaks and its relevance, it does have the power now to almost keep other companies in check or to make people think twice before they act in a certain manner privately for fear that if they do fall victim to a hack, that those things may in fact be out there, and to perhaps rethink their actions a little bit more to keep them in check.
Okay, well, let's bring it back to WikiLeaks specifically then. I mean, are they still relevant? Are they in the right? Are they on the right side of the argument for releasing this information? Because, on the one hand, you sort of get to learn about the inner workings of a multinational corporation that, has some ties to the White House, and WikiLeaks has tried to claim that they have connections to the U.S. military-industrial complex. How? I don't know. But then, of course, they say, the company even lobbies on issues like internet policy, piracy, trade agreements, copyright, but that's just simply the nature of their industry. They have to protect their own company interest. So where do you fall on this? I mean, is WikiLeaks relevant in the sense that they're actually still putting out information and letting it be known to the public about important matters? Or is this just one of these kind of low-hanging fruits of them? They're like, let's go for it.
No, I think that anytime you have a massive breach of data, there can be things that the public arguably has the right to know. And when you have a large entity that sits at the chair of the Motion Picture Association of America that actively lobbies to have foreign residents arrested in their own home just to be brought up on charges in a United States court, and they're actively lobbying the federal government, spending money for those lobbying efforts and trying to get their influence both on the Hill and the White House, then I would argue, yes, any information that can be gleaned into the inner workings of that corporation should be fair game. Like for example, I noticed that WikiLeaks didn't publish the list of consumers who were hacked at Target when Target had its database breach. They're very selective in what they do put out there, and when they do, there's generally always an argument to be made that information in the public, there's a good to be served there. So I think that they are still relevant, and I do believe that what they put out, by and large, it gets reported on every time, and so there is some relevance to it because the journalists in the media community seem to deem so, because it's in the New York Times, it's in the Wall Street Journal, it's on Huffington Post, and it's on wall-to-wall every blog in any industry that it connects to.
Okay, fair enough. Makes sense. So let's move on. There is a super fight happening, and if you haven't heard about it yet, you probably live in a cave or under a rock like a caveman. Mayweather Pacquiao. This fight seems like it's taken forever to get around to. Both fighters are pretty much in the twilight of their careers, no longer in their primes, and this could realistically be the last fight for each of them, regardless of how it goes. So, leading up to this fight, there's been a lot of analysis and a lot of talk about, their different fighting styles, the odds. There's also that documentary on HBO, At Last, I believe is what it's called. Then, of course, there are the odds makers, all in favor, of course, Mayweather. I mean, he's one of the greatest defensive fighters and points fighters that we've probably arguably ever seen in our generation. How do you think this fight's going to go, first and foremost?
Wow, right off the bat, just like that? No,
no like
dinner,
that.
no sweet talk?
No, not at all. We'll get to that after the fact.
Well, okay, let's look for a moment that Mayweather is a 2-to-1 favorite. Being a 2-to-1 favorite, odds makers don't just pull that number out of their ass. That number comes from a place of, of some discipline and some understanding. So I'm going to go the long way around on this. Mayweather is a 2-to-1 favorite. He is fantastic defensively. He does play the point system more than he does, actually boxing. So I'd argue that he's more a boxer and less a fighter. Manny Pacquiao, on the other hand, is a fighter. He throws many, many punches per round, punches in bunches, and I don't think Mayweather has a whole lot of experience dealing with people who throw a whole lot of punches, particularly from a southpaw. Mm-hmm. But with that said, Manny Pacquiao suffered a devastating knockout at the hands of Marquez. So I think I'm going to have to give this one to Mayweather, only because I know that he's going to run, and I don't believe he is going to engage Pacquiao in a way that that's going to allow him to really tee off or penetrate the armor. I think it's going to be a frustrating fight for a lot of fight fans, honestly, but I do think Mayweather is going to win, probably by decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close or even bad decision.
Well, let's start off with this: the Pacquiao-Marquez fight. That was the fourth fight in their little rivalry there. It was also 2012. That was the fight for the WBO's Champion of the Decade belt at welterweight, and basically Pacquiao got caught with 1 second left in the sixth round. All right, so a little bit of perspective there. All right, he was knocked out with 1 second left. Basically, Marquez countered his jab and then popped him with an uppercut to the jaw.
To be fair, though, there may have been 1 second left in the round, but he spent the better part of the next minute on the floor, unconscious.
That is true. He just caught him flush, all right? But what I'm going to say here is the fact that, all right, Mayweather's a great technical fighter, great defensive fighter. You and I were discussing this before the show, that Mayweather hasn't knocked anybody out in, 10 years? Something like that?
No, it's been more recent than that. I think it's been 5 or 6 years since he's actually gotten a KO. 4, 2011. All
right, fine. Even still, though, Mayweather doesn't go into a fight looking to end the fight early. He basically wants to win on points and points alone. It's kind of like Machado in MMA. It's just a very frustrating style. It's difficult to watch sometimes, and he's basically going for this. How shall I say this? He wants history to recognize him as the greatest pound-for-pound fighter of all time. Undefeated, and nobody could ever touch him, and this and that. But he basically plays to not lose, and by doing so, he plays to the favor of the refs and wins on points and points alone. With an aggressive fighter such as Pacquiao, who is doing something right now that he's never done for any other fight before in his career, which is he's watching previous film of fights of Mayweather. I think Pacquiao is going to be the aggressor here, and he's going to press the action, and I think he's going to have the stamina to where he can be the aggressor for a solid 7 or 8 rounds. I know he's the underdog, but Mayweather has had troubles with southpaws in the past. Now, granted, he's only ever fought 5 or 6 lefties throughout his career. Obviously, he's won, but those lefties have scored more points against him than any other fighter before. And I just believe that Pacquiao is going to have that determination, that desire to really, truly go out on top.
Possibly, but the thing about Mayweather is that he is a fantastic counterpuncher, and Pacquiao's chin is now in question. He went out, and he went out hard, and any time that happens to a fighter, especially when they're, up there in years, anything over 32, once the lights get shut out on you really hard, you have to imagine that it's easier and easier to turn those lights out again. So between Mayweather being a fantastic counterpuncher and Pacquiao's chin now being called into question, I think that tilts the scales a little bit more in Mayweather's favor. But again, I don't think Mayweather's going to fight him. I don't think Mayweather is a fighter. he is not a fighter.
Not at all.
Any stretch.
Well, he's a showman.
He's a fantastic boxer. I mean, textbook, technical skills and the slickness and all of that. I mean, he's the total package when it comes to being a slick counterpuncher who can win on points, but he leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to being a sportsman, having class, or having the heart of a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing with Mayweather is he's able to pick his spots very, very well. Okay, I mean, he throws a punch 95% of the time he's going to hit. All right? So, we'll say that. But the problem is, he only throws 20 punches or so around or somewhere around there. I mean, he's not somebody that's going to throw a lot of punches. He conserves his energy, and he does it well, and he makes sure that he picks his spots very well, which is why when he throws a punch, he's likely to hit you with it. Whereas Pacquiao, he can throw, 60-some-odd punches in a round. He can still hit you with quite a bit, but he's definitely the more aggressive of the two. Whereas Mayweather kind of almost wants to toy around from time to time because he doesn't want to get caught. I mean, after all, he is 38 years old. If you had to put money on it, are you going Mayweather?
Yeah, but I'm different because I put money down on the people I really want to see get their ass kicked. And Floyd Mayweather is about as dislikable as they come in the sport of boxing or MMA for that matter. He's just a dislikable character. So for me, I put my money on Mayweather because, I think he's probably going to squeak out a win in Lyoto Machida fashion, but I also really want to see him get beat. So either way, it's a good night for me. I either get to watch Floyd Mayweather have his first loss handed to him, or I get a couple $100 in my pocket.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting, I suppose. It's, he's a great counterpuncher, like you mentioned. I mean, in his fight against Dana back in 2014 in May, he actually threw 426 punches, landed 230, 54%. That's insane. That's an insane amount of total punches that actually landed, 54%. Whereas Maidana, for example, threw 858, landed 221, 26%. I mean, and that's considered okay, but that just goes to show you how technical Mayweather is. I mean, he threw half as many punches and landed twice the amount almost, or just basically the same amount as Maidana did. And so it's one of those things where, he's very, very efficient with his punches. He's very efficient with his jabs. Throughout his career, he lands a little over 30% of those. And he's also very efficient with his power punches. He lands a little over 60% of those for his career. And so he's definitely a very efficient boxer. I question his heart in the sense that, does he really want to fight, or is he just one of these guys where he wants to basically let it go on, let the refs decide, and he's going to have you there because he's the more efficient boxer. You know what I mean?
Well, to say nothing of, his relationship with the casinos, the Nevada Athletics Commission, and any other number of reasons. I mean, I don't trust Nevada as a whole to get it right on the scorecards. We see this time and time and time again with the UFC in Nevada. Boxing is, in my opinion, perhaps a little less transparent and shady, or a little more shady. But looking at the two, I mean, I guess the real benchmark I would look at to measure these two guys is they both fought Oscar De La Hoya within a year of each other.
Right.
And Manny Pacquiao was able to knock De La Hoya out. And Mayweather was not. In fact, he got a split decision. He didn't even take all the judges, so that was even in question.
And before the two of these, De La Hoya was arguably considered the greatest fighter pound for pound, period.
Yeah, absolutely. So they both got him within a year of each other, and one was able to put him away, and the other one had to squeak out a split decision. This is going to be a good fight, I hope. I hope that it's a fight and not a point, a game of points.
Yeah, anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm really looking forward to this. I feel like the fight's 10 years kind of past its prime, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, even if this fight was 5-6 years ago when it was first talked about, it's like, yeah, this should happen. This is the next logical fight in boxing, and it didn't for different reasons based on different people's opinions. Mine is that Mayweather was ducking him because he knew that as a lefty, Pacquiao probably had an advantage over his style, over his defensive ability, but whatever. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. But yeah, I'm going Pac-Man. I'm going Pac-Man and probably 10.
Well, so you think he's going to put him away in the 10th?
I think he's going to put him away. I really do.
Well, I got to say, I hope you're right, because I think that there are many, many people that want to see Manny Pacquiao win. But as a boxing fan, I have a hard time envisioning that, just because Mayweather's style is such that he's elusive to the point of running or intentionally tying up and clinching or, taunting. Like, he uses so many tools in the toolbox that are not fighting or not, proper boxing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's to the point of frustration to where, if you're fighting an inexperienced fighter, they're likely to just sort of go off and try to sell out a round because they're not sure if they're going to be able to catch you. Whereas Pacquiao, I think he's smart enough and experienced enough to where he's going to know better. So we'll see how it goes. So, some pretty interesting movies / documentaries have been released this week. I know you really want to discuss Montage of Heck. And, there's a movie that came out that I'm actually really interested in. And I'm also very interested in Montage of Heck. It looks very, very interesting. I'm going to definitely make the time to see it. But Ex Machina. Talk about AI and developing essentially an artificial intelligent machine that rivals the emotional intelligence of human beings. But let's talk about Montage of Heck first, because this is probably for the first time in the history of Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain, and Nirvana to where you actually have sort of an authorized documentary biography of Cobain and Nirvana and that whole situation. So what interests you so much about this?
I think this is the first time where you have a lot of participants who were close to Nirvana, during their stardom. You have a lot of people who are talking now who knew him growing up. And you have bandmates and people close to him speaking with the perspective of time having passed, where people feel that it's okay to open up and tell a more honest story. And I think that that combined with the fact that, Dave Grohl and Courtney Love and Krist Novoselic all kind of came together to put this, to make this happen, really allows for a broad portrait of the person, of the band, of, what unfolded and how it unfolded in a way that is going to be more honest than a lot of the selectively sourced books or documentaries we've seen in the past, where you had El Duce claiming Courtney Love tried to hire people to kill Kurt Cobain, and just sort of fringe elements and things that didn't make sense. I think this is the first time you're going to get an in-depth and an honest reflection of what happened, because so much time has passed and because the passions are burning perhaps not quite as bright.
Well, and keep in mind, Dave Grohl and Courtney Love, they absolutely despise each other. I mean, to the point to where Dave Grohl and Court basically told her on no uncertain terms to suck his dick.
Yeah, well, I mean, Courtney Love has a way of getting under people's skin. She's been in any number of feuds with the most odd assortment of people you can imagine.
Yeah.
So it's good that they've buried the hatchet, if only momentarily, to put this together. They seem to have buried the hatchet long term, so we'll see. But Montage of Heck premieres tonight, the 24th, and it looks really good.
Well, let me ask you this though, like just your own personal opinion here. There's long been the conspiracy theorists out there said that basically Courtney Love murdered Kurt Cobain by basically forcing the overdose in him and then using the shotgun, that sort of thing, or having somebody else do it, whatever. Do you think what maybe played into that conspiracy theory is the fact that she's just really not one to not only A, give a crap about what other people think, but B, just sort of go along with what other people think no matter how crazy, because she's like, you know what? You're wrong, and I'm going to let you keep thinking it.
Wait, so you're asking me what now? If Courtney Love...
If she just sort of never really opened up before about what really happened to her then husband, concerning his suicide, because the conspiracy theorists thought she had a hand in his death, thought maybe she actually, murdered for hire, or she had more of a direct, handling in his death, something to those effects. I mean, do you think maybe she just never really spoke out against it or really did much to say, no, that's not what happened, because just of her personality and her way of dealing with people?
Well, I think she has. She's been on the Howard Stern show and talked before about some of those conspiracy theories and pretty much dismissed them as crazy right off the bat without giving it any serious attention. And I think a lot of these these things swirl, just because anytime you have somebody that is that elevated, a celebrity, dying under circumstances that aren't easily and very clearly, illuminated, you're going to have any number of people and conspiracy theorists coming up and making up whatever ridiculous story that fits their narrative.
Yeah, no, I mean, Rolling Stone actually came out and said this is probably the most intimate rock documentary ever. So that's actually pretty high marks there. But and also things that have been written and things that have been said. Because also Frances Bean, Kurt Cobain and Courtney's daughter, she also, Courtney said that she wanted their daughter to actually have a say and make sure she was okay with it, what she was. But she actually came out and said she's not even a Nirvana fan, which I thought was pretty interesting. Kind of, makes you think that, her father would probably be pretty proud that she's like, nah, screw you guys, I don't like you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, she probably grew up in it, and I don't know. I mean, there's any number of reasons why that wouldn't be your cup of tea. I mean, if you were born, I guess I would phrase it another way. What music do you like that was produced within a year or two of you being born?
I can go as far back as the Beatles, in all honesty. But I'm not head over heels for them. I can listen to classic stuff like that. I would consider it oldies, actually. Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, that sort of thing. But as far as artists, I mean, I was born in '84, and I'd say Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains is sort of at the upper end of that spectrum there for me personally. Before we kind of sort of jump into the new metal scene.
Yeah, I think it all has to do with, the music that your generation came up with. Nobody grows up with the music of 10 years before their generation, for the most part. So it would make sense that somebody born, in the mid-'90s wouldn't be a fan of the stuff that was out in the mid-'90s, just like you're not a fan of the stuff that came out in the mid-'80s. Right.
I mean, short of, Guns N' Roses or, a few bands like that, Bad Company or whatnot, I'm not a big fan of it, that scene. So it's, it's grunge, it's a lot of the classic rock from the 60s and 70s, and then all of a sudden, you jump to basically, the late 90s to the 2000s for me, personally. So it's pretty interesting. Now, so a movie that also released on the 24th, which is tonight that we're recording, is Ex Machina. Alex Garland, he was the writer of 28 Days Later and also Sunshine, which phenomenal sci-fi / horror flicks, made his directorial debut with this film. And basically the premise is this. This absolutely brilliant but yet reclusive CEO / inventor scientist, Nathan Bateman, played by Oscar Isaac, basically creates this AI, the first true borderline human, artificially intelligent machine that actually looks like a female to an extent. But all of a sudden, while he's trying to test out his creation's limitations, him and the person he invited to test it out discovers all of a sudden, holy crap, this machine, this person almost, the emotional intelligence there almost proves to be more sophisticated and more deceptive than either of them could have ever imagined and has ever been realized before. It's just one of those films which what intrigues me about it is basically sort of playing with the idea of, all right, well, what if we actually truly did develop real AI as we've always imagined it in sci-fi films? I mean, think about this. The first true AI machine all of a sudden is well, wait a minute, what makes you more human than I am? But all of a sudden this machine has more of a capability to basically murder your ass than a person does. It's kind of one of those scary thoughts, holy crap, the conspiracy theorists, the military takeover of our country / the machines are taking over. It sort of falls in the line of that mode of thought there, is how scary it can actually be, which I think is what intrigues me.
Yeah, I do think that artificial intelligence at some point is going to screw humanity. I don't know how or why. I don't have a logical argument behind it, but there's just something underlying that tells me that humans are very, very flawed, as is the code we generate. And I think it would just take a handful of malicious injections into artificial intelligence to reprogram, and that could be one of a billion possible scenarios that could send artificial intelligence sideways, particularly when it's connected to a cloud. Yeah, I could go on a long diatribe about social media being the birth of the hive mind and that being plugged into automated systems for all kinds of things in the future. But I do think that movies like that are ideal horror films in a postmodern society as technology continues to accelerate.
Well, absolutely. And then before we get out of here and end the show, let me ask you this straight up, because I know my answer, and I'll give my answer after the fact. But all right, trade-off here. Would you give up your physical body, like your actual human body, in exchange to basically have your mind implemented and inserted into the cloud? For it's still you, your personality, your thoughts, and you get to absorb all this knowledge. Would you be willing to give up your physical human body for that?
Absolutely not.
Really? Why?
Because I have control over my body. Once my consciousness is transferred to any server or number of servers in the cloud, as it were, it's a simple matter of deleting a database and you cease to exist, and there's nothing physically you can do to prevent that.
Fair point. But I would make that trade-off in a heartbeat.
Really?
I would, because all of a sudden it almost becomes a game of who can beat who. Those little peons, the humans over there, or me, this supreme intelligent being who has access to all information everywhere. I mean, could you really ever be destroyed if you basically already know what's going to happen? Because, society and humans are so tapped into technology now, you would literally know close to everything.
Right, but your physiology would not exist, so you wouldn't have the ability to feel pleasure or to feel gratified from your omnipotent position of all-knowingness.
I wouldn't need to. It's cool.
You say that, but you wouldn't have ego. You wouldn't have emotion. You wouldn't have your DNA sort of driving that force.
Logic would be driving it, and humans would basically be considered the enemy, and you all would have to go extinct. Sorry.
Well, that's fine. We were doomed to kill ourselves at some point anyway.
No, it's just basically my perfect scenario, actually, in the world of AI and that sort of thing, that next step, so to speak, is essentially Battlestar Galactica in the Cylons. Is basically your consciousness automatically gets uploaded to a new body whenever you die. I'd be totally down for that.
Never saw Battlestar Galactica. I cannot relate with what you're saying right now. But
well, that's fine. All the cool listeners can, so. But that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you so much for listening. Again, my name's Lance Ranker. That's Rick Ranker, my actual brother in real life somehow. And so be sure to check us out on Konsume.com. That's Konsume with a K. You can also hit us up on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @LanceM.Ranker. His is @RickRanker. Or also @ConsumeHQ. Pretty simple. And you can also find the show on iTunes, on YouTube, and just go to Konsume.com in general, and you can listen to that while checking out our latest and greatest. So any closing thoughts, Rick?
No, just really looking forward to the Pacquiao Mayweather fight that will be coming up next week.
Absolutely. Go Pac-Man. So that's